Hey Islanders, and welcome to episode 41 of the Camano Voice. On this episode, I bring back an old guest. Please welcome Evan Caldwell. Hi, I'm Brandon Erickson, and you're listening to the Camano Voice podcast, where I interview folks around Camano Island and beyond. If you want to stay up to date on events, businesses, and even hear a little history of this area, subscribe to this podcast and share with your friends. Thanks for listening. Hey Islanders, and welcome to another episode of the Camano Voice, where we release a new episode every Tuesday. On this episode, we're actually going to do a little bit of a deviation from our normal format here. We're actually going to go over COVID-19 and kind of focus in on how it's affecting the Stanwood Camano area. Evan Caldwell, you'll remember from a previous episode, is a reporter for the Stanwood Camano News. And so he's been doing a lot of writing on this subject of how COVID is affecting the Stanwood Camano area from a business level, from a school level, and from a human connection level, so on a person-to-person basis. But we also wanted to infuse a little bit of hope and a little bit of positive news to this as well. So we do end it with talking about some of the positive things we've seen come out of this and what are some of the aspects that we've seen in that have been really positive. So without further ado, here's my conversation with Evan Caldwell. Hey Islanders, it's Brandon with the Camano Voice. And today I have a returning guest, and we're going to talk about some stuff, the current events of what's going on. Welcome back to the podcast, Evan Caldwell.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah. So I wanted to bring you back onto the podcast specifically to talk about what's going on around COVID and really kind of zero in on how it's affecting the Stanwood Camano area, because you've been doing a lot of research and stuff on that. So I just kind of wanted to kick it off with what was kind of your first article and what was your first focus of when you started kind of working on this?
Well, when the cases first started climbing, it hit the Stanwood Camano area in kind of two areas. One, Josephine's was one of the first ones in the state to kind of have a little outbreak. A few people, and we had a press conference down in Everett. It was still really new. A lot of people were still trying to figure out what's going on.
Yeah.
And at the same time, the schools, Stanwood ended up being one of the first schools to close. And it was largely because we had cases at Josephine's. We had students, we had teachers that had connections down there. And they just wanted to play it safe. And so we kind of had that affect us a little bit sooner. And as a result, a lot of people in the Stanwood Camano area kind of went through a lot of the motions of this process a little bit sooner than the rest of the state and the rest of the country did.
Yeah, well, and I remember when the schools, like when they started talking about the schools and everything like that, and then, they said, well, we're going to close the schools for a little bit. And when they were first talking about that, I was like, oh, they're going to close it for a couple weeks and then they'll get back on schedule. I'm like, man, this is going to really screw up their school schedule. And then when they came out with the announcement and said it's going to be closed until the end of April, I was completely blown away because that was 6 weeks away at the time.
Yeah. And, in the word since then that it's being closed the rest of the school year, it's still, I would qualify it as kind of a shock to the system. A lot of parents, a lot of people, a lot of teachers, everyone's still trying to grapple with what exactly that means and how to kind of adjust to it.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I've talked to a few different of the teachers and stuff, and they already have one of the hardest jobs. And they just got through this whirlwind of flip-flopping back and forth, and then suddenly it was like, okay, do what you've been doing, but suddenly make it online, go.
Exactly. So, everyone in the school system from top to bottom has a really tough task right now. They've been a part of a education system that's worked fairly well for the last 100 years. And in the span of a couple of days, they're being asked to completely reinvent it. So it's understandable that it's not like a flip of a light switch to now the kids are learning online. It's going to be a process to kind of figure out kind of what works, not only like what works with what teachers can kind of design as lesson plans, but how to convey those to students. And then like you don't want to, I mean, a lot of these students are going to get help with their parents, and you don't want to overwhelm the family structure. So a lot of different moving parts to what they've got to kind of figure out.
Yeah. And how have you seen that been rolled out with, like, for instance, like the Stanwood school system?
Yeah. So they started first with what they would call, I think they called them enrichment materials, which is not new lessons, and it's not anything that's graded. It's kind of a review thing, kind of to, kids can do to keep sharp, stay busy. But on April 27th, the school district is going to be rolling out new material with new lessons, and it's going to be different. I don't think that parents should expect to have their kids sit in front of a computer for 6 hours a day and there's a teacher on the other end of the screen teaching a lesson. It's going to be something different, and what that is still has not quite been figured out yet. But it's going to be 30 minutes of a math lesson that they're going to design in some online platform. There's a couple of different ones out there that the school uses. Clever is one. Seesaw will be another. And as you go up in the grade level, they'll probably have more minutes and some more assignments, just to try and get some sort of teaching done, because the parents want it. I think the kids want it. I know my kids do. They're at the point where they're even ready for school. The teachers, I mean, that's why they got into this business. They care about the kids, and they want to teach them, and so they do. They just kind of have to figure out still kind of what's the best way to get from point A to point B.
Right. And just to confirm, when they did the latest announcement, and to place this for everyone that's listening, because if this ever gets listened to later on, the date
it changes hour by hour. You're right. You got to tell.
Yeah, we're on April 8th of 2020. So if any of this sounds weird, that's, if you go back in the history books, you'll be able to see that. But has Washington canceled school for the rest of the year, like including starting the fall?
No, not into the fall, but
okay.
The state school superintendent did hint that theoretically could be a possibility, depending on, how the numbers and the caseloads look right now. But what did come out today, April 8th, the State Board of Education ruled that they could waive some of the required credits for seniors. So that kind of paves the way for the seniors to pretty much be able to graduate if they needed to. And Stanwood has 330 seniors, and the vast majority of them were already on track, and so they're probably going to be just fine. But the few that still needed a little bit more work, the school district is still going to work with them, still get them ready. But worst case scenario, the state is providing waivers to them to make sure that they can still figure out a way to get them a diploma.
Okay, very cool. So then, with all your research with the school and stuff, have you been able to, I mean, I guess with quarantine and everything, it's harder, but have you been able to have contact with some of the senior students that have been around?
No, but when I've had limited contact with them, but I follow a lot of them. I follow, so the social media scene, to a degree.
Yeah.
And when school was canceled and officially ended the spring sports season, put graduation into question, prom is kind of out the door. I could sense that they were very unhappy.
Yeah. Well, and it's, I mean, I just, the kids that have, as a high schooler, right? You've been living your whole life kind of building to this moment, yep. Graduating high school, getting all the perks of being a senior, kind of coasting through that last bit of school, and then like senior prom, and really having your moment. And to have that completely taken away, to someone that's in that point, like that's their world. It's like, that's what they were working towards.
Yeah. And I really do feel for them too, because it's a lot of fun memories. But if you can flip it around and look at the positive, because, 20 something years from now, when you're in my shoes, you're going to look back at this time and it's going to be very unique that nobody else gets to go through. So yeah. having been to 46 graduations in my lifetime now, keeping track, they're very the same. They're a lot of the same, and they're not super unique. But this year, the seniors are going to have something unique. So, I mean, they're definitely going to have that feather in their cap.
Yep. I'm sure that's what they're thinking about right now.
I know they're not, but 20 years from now, then they'll come around.
Yep. Well, yeah. And I think it was, I think the other funny not funny, but the other thing for these kids that are going through all of this right now, again, I look at it from an adult's perspective, and as a businessman, and like, how is this affecting the business? How can I make it through? But for these kids who are used to seeing each other on an almost daily basis, even kids that are homeschooled are used to seeing their friends a couple times a week, to suddenly be completely stopped from having any interaction with your friends apart from social media and online. It's just, I mean, that would be world ending for me at that age.
Yeah, and it's tough. And I've got a middle schooler, so I can kind of see it there. You can video chat and you can talk to them, but it's nowhere near the same of being in the physical presence. Especially those teenagers, they're very physical. They're pushing, they're touching, they're shoving, they're that's half their communication.
Right.
So it's tough. I feel for them.
Yeah, they need to get that energy out, and then they're like, okay, stay inside, go.
Yep, exactly. No, they're having tough times.
Oh, so okay, so with the schools, like they're working through it all, but obviously, have you got to talk to many of the teachers?
Some, yeah, and some of the teachers have kept pushing on, and some of the classes. Some of the AP classes got cleared to continue working because they were kind of already in a college atmosphere, and they just kind of followed the college model of online school, and that had been existing for a while. So they are continuing to meet and still doing some of their schooling. But then, you get to the elementary level, and you can't really meet as a class of first graders and go over stuff, and so it can be hard.
Yeah, well, I'm sure for anyone that's in those grades, or for the parents and the teachers, like, it's such a unique time of life that, like, they're just grasping certain concepts, and it's not like you can just sit down in front of a screen and like explain it to them. They have to be shown and handheld through all these things. Like, yeah, when you're talking about online teaching, I think for me, a lot of times I'll think of it from a college perspective or something like that, where you're like, yeah, you just get your schoolwork, you get it done, you submit it. It's not that big a deal. But for these ages where that's not how they learn, like, how do you transfer that to online?
Yeah, so that's definitely one of the things that the teachers are doing right now. A lot of the teachers are meeting in grade level groups and trying to craft lessons that will work virtually at each grade level. But I mean, you have to consider so many different factors because they're going to require help from parents. And then you have some parents who have the time and ability to do it. And you have other parents who are, in this day and age, are still working. Yeah. And they come home from a full shift somewhere, and they don't really have time to put the same amount of effort in as another parent did. And then that raises the question of equity, which is a big one because there's a federal law about education equity that the school have to be providing as equitable as education as possible. And so that's just another twist in the turns that they have to do. Yeah.
Man, that's crazy. That's just the innovation that they're having to figure out on the fly. And like you were saying before, like from a system that's worked for hundreds of years or 100 years, like suddenly like, okay, now switch it.
Exactly. And to all their credit, they dropped everything and they started to get to work at it, and it wasn't going to happen overnight. And they've been plugging away every day. They've been meeting and so far it's so good. I know there's a lot of parents out there that wanted, something to start, and I get it, but I also get why they kind of have to go, baby step style.
Right. There's a lot to get done. And these teachers, I mean, already have such a big job on a regular school year, and to just quadruple their workload of like building something from the ground up and try and get it launched in such a short amount of time. It's crazy.
Exactly. While following a lot of federal and state laws, they probably weren't all entirely, fluent in.
Yeah. And new ones that come out every day, I'm sure.
That is, and you were talking about it earlier. Everything is so far last month has been changing, not even on a daily basis. It's been changing on an hourly basis.
Yeah. So let's pivot a little bit then. What you've also done some research then on the kind of the small businesses and how that's been affecting, how they've been affected by COVID during this time as well, right?
Yeah, and I know you're probably more in tune with this too, but we looked at the restaurant industry, which was just, pretty much flipped upside down because of this whole thing. And we looked at kind of the small retail businesses here in town. And then we looked at some of the resources that the government and the state have just been thrown out there, and kind of the how to navigate all of this new stuff that's being thrown at every business owner. And while the business owner has all these things at their disposal, it's not really what they're used to. Usually, a small business owner is used to running their business, and it takes a lot of their time and energy, and then they're really passionate about it, and they're not quite ready to just stop what they're doing and sit down and flip through how many pages of SBA loan material that you've got to kind of read and digest, and it's time sensitive.
Yep.
So that's definitely one aspect of it. And then the restaurant aspect of it is that everything changed so fast that if you wanted to kind of keep the doors open, you had to change really fast. And it was complicated and hard because you had to meet all these new rules and requirements. In the meantime, you're juggling payroll with everyone that was, and the change in customer behavior. So you really had to be nimble if you wanted to keep the doors open. And in most cases, you probably had to shed some staff or staff hours in order to keep operating.
Right.
And some were able, some were not. Some just kind of hit the pause button, and they're just kind of going to stop for a second and regroup. And you can't blame them.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's been the hardest thing with everything that started. I mean, with everything with the Governor Inslee mentioning, coming out with the essential and non-essential businesses, I understand why they have to do what they have to do to try and contain this. But just from from the business person's perspective, it's this, like, they still have bills to pay. They still have these things they have to do. And to not be allowed to work, they have to figure out what they're doing and how they can continue to move forward when they can't open their doors. Exactly.
And then you can take it a step further and say, those business people also have mortgages to pay for the home that they live in.
Yeah.
And they got to figure out a way to get money. And the state even opened some doors for business owners to apply for some of these unemployment benefits. But even that, they said, sure. And then the state goes, wait, we're not, our computer system's not even coded for that yet. And so they've got to completely kind of redevelop their system in order to allow somebody to do it. And in the meantime, if you wanted to do it without the computer system, which means doing it online, you'd have to call. And calling the unemployment department right now is just impossible.
Right.
I mean, so they're overwhelmed with that, and just it's an hours long wait if you're lucky.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and then with the restaurants that I've been seeing, like, it's even if you get everything launched and you're able to nimbly switch on to online ordering and delivering and all this stuff, it's a different mindset for your customer base. Your customer base, especially if you're a sit-down restaurant normally, your customer base comes to you because they want to have a night out, or they want to do dinner out and maybe get a drink and have this away from home place.
Yeah.
And so your customer mentality, you've got to change all of that, which is never easy. And so you can turn it on the next day and then be crickets because people aren't used to that. Your main customers aren't used to doing that.
Yeah. I mean, restaurants in general were a place to congregate with people that you knew and you liked and you wanted to hang out for a while. And that's exactly what you can't do right now.
Yeah.
And so, I know they're hurting though. And then the ones that seem to be finding some sort of success right now have just shifted toward kind of making, and I'm speaking mostly toward like, sit down dinner places, shifting toward kind of making family style meals that can be delivered or taken out.
Yeah.
So instead of having a family of 6 order 6 different items from a menu, you've got the one big giant like plate of lasagna that they made for you.
Yeah.
And sides or whatever. And that's easier to keep warm in the oven and serve lots of people. And I get that, but it still doesn't come close to replacing what it was before this.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, with everything going on, they've tried to push out all of these things so quickly, like whether it's with the SBA, and then today, or maybe it was yesterday, Washington released a thing that they're actually doing as a state to try and help these small businesses as well. And then, there's the economic relief things and all these other things that they're trying to put in there. But again, as a business owner, you already have a lot that you're working with and trying to juggle, like, even like simple things like scheduling, inventory. How are we pivoting in our business, and how are we, if you have to make that transition to an online ordering type thing, like you've got to do all of that. And then on top of that, like you mentioned before, you've got this stack of paperwork that you're like, if I don't do this, I may not be in business tomorrow. But at the same time, if I don't switch on online ordering and get all of that figured out, I also may not be online, be alive tomorrow.
Exactly. So, I mean, for example, you were talking about the Working Washington Small Business Grant that the governor announced this week. It was a grant to provide $10,000 for small businesses under 10 employees to kind of, pay for rent, utility bills, and that type of thing. Did you consider applying for that, or know anybody that did?
Yeah, so we've looked into that, and I think it's a little confusing in how they've written these things, because they've all been written so quickly, and they're just trying to get them out. Yeah. It is one that we're looking at, because it at first I was like, well, I don't think it works, because one of the paperwork said 10 or less employees, and then some say 10 or less full-time employees. So then they've got formulas and all that. So I think I do qualify. We just haven't actually done the paperwork and stuff.
And see, that's just one of the handful of things that are out there for people. And so you got to walk through all that paperwork, and it takes all that time. And then on top of it, like, you're not fully guaranteed that you're even get into that relief, because as of today, there was just over 100 small businesses in the area that have applied for it. Yeah. And that's just our area. So times that by the rest of the state. Yeah. And they've got to A, process this, and then B, figure out who gets the money and how much of it and when. So there's no guarantee you're going to get some of that. It's very very tough time to be a small business owner right now.
Yeah. Well, and then, like I said, for the small business owners that are unable to actually open their doors, they've had to figure out, like, can they do deliveries, or can they do, a lot of them, I found out, you have to actually mail it. You can't do actual deliveries. So, like, trying to set that up and transition all of that stuff too, has been another big step. So,
yeah, I don't envy you at that at all.
So
it's like going to school all day, and then the professor gives you a whole bunch of homework to do, and you're like, I worked all day, and then you're giving me more to do when I get home.
Yep. Yeah. Your brain power is already done. And then, of course, you've got, for all of us now, like, that have kids, you come home from a big day of work, you've got kids, you want to connect with them and have a little bit of time with them so that they get to interact with their mom or dad. And then you're like, okay, now I need to get back into this and do this thing. And so then you're jumping back on the computer after they go to bed. And it's crazy right now. Oh, so then, okay, moving then past the business side, you've kind of looked into more of the human side of it as well. What have you kind of been discovering through there?
Well, we've kind of looked at kind of how this is affecting the people in the area, and some of the responses that are out there. I know like the kind of the large nonprofits in the area that rely on a lot of events for fundraising don't have that, so then they don't have the money out there to then help people. And this is a time where there's a lot of people that need help, and so we were trying to kind of track down just how much that's affecting people. And we've got, like, the Camano Center and the Stanwood Senior Center and the Stanwood Area Foundation, like all those community organizations in town that are just seeing this huge rise in need, have at the same time have this huge drop in resources and money. Yeah. And so they're out there asking for donations, and I know that people have been responding fairly well. So that was really cool to see.
Nice.
And you saw, jumping back to schools real fast, they were handing out, they hand out food every day to people. And I know that they hand out, I think it's more than about 500 lunches a day to area kids. So keeping people fed is a very good thing. Right. There's more, there's fun sides of this thing too. We did a story about a Camano Island man, Dave Casera, who started an online gallery for artists in the area that did works since this pandemic has started, and they have nowhere to show them. And so he's created an online gallery.
Oh, very cool.
that was a little innovative. We're checking in with the area pet shelters, CASA and NOAA, and I think CASA was almost out of pets, and NOAA wasn't too far behind. So it's kind of interesting in this day and age that everyone's either adopting or they're fostering the pets.
Yeah.
So that's kind of fun to see,
Yeah. No, that's neat. Seeing, and really, I think that's one of the neat aspects in seeing all of this. And you see it across the country, but more focusing on like the Stanwood Camano area. What are some of the like the positive aspects, or how have you seen just neat aspects within the community because of this, because of COVID?
I get a lot of people that have messaged and asked me just how can I help, and that mentality kind of was out there before this pandemic either too. Like, this is a very community minded area, and it's a bummer because I don't really have a way to say, like, you can go do this and this and this, but people are out there and they're trying to find a way to help. And I think it's a good kind of mental health space to be in, where people have pushed past this and they just want to be productive. We saw that, I think, in the group of people that are making masks at home.
Yeah.
I think they were over 100 quilters. So the Days for Girls Club and then the 2 or 3 different local quilting clubs joined forces, and they have somebody kind of spearheading their projects, and they've made over 1,000 masks for the area.
Oh, very cool.
And they're continuing to do that. And then there are some places that have started making their own homemade hand sanitizer. 2 places up just northwest, I think, Anacortes and Mount Vernon.
Yeah.
So, people are stepping up and trying to find ways that they can do it. It's tough because in order to help, you usually are getting out there,
Yeah.
Shaking hands and making things happen, but that's exactly what you can't do right now. So, I mean, you see people that have put things in their windows, cheer people up on their walks. You see more people going out for walks, especially with this weather being nice, which is great.
Yeah.
I wish I had another way to tell people how they can help, and I'm really, pleased to see that there's so many people reaching out, asking how to help.
Yeah. And, I've seen a lot of like social distanced from the car, like birthday wishes. And then, we've been working with the food bank a little bit, just in just some of our day olds. We're trying to reduce foot traffic through the building. So we don't want to attract more people through to walk in by having day olds out. So we contacted the food bank, and Lynn Ayers, the director of that, she's like, yeah, we can take those. And but she said, I've been able to talk to her a little bit, and she said they've been overwhelmed with the amount of people that they're now working with and trying to get fed. Mm-hmm. But the stepping up from the community has been incredible. She said every time someone calls out from a shift because of some issue, someone else has immediately stepped up and volunteered for that time. And for her, she can't actually work in the building right now because the food bank has banned anyone that's over a certain age of being in there because they're high risk. And so she has to do everything and manage everything and direct everything from home. But she said the community response has been fantastic on that.
That's good. And, I mean, when in the early days, it's been like a month now, but when Josephine's first had some of the cases, it was neat to see people reach out and support the staff at Josephine's. I mean, we had the people deliver coffee, and then there was people that delivered donuts, and then people delivered a whole bunch of cards and other cookies to the staff, and people there that were kind of on the front lines of this at the time. Yeah. Yeah. And go ahead. I was going to say, like, and to go further into Josephine's, this virus has hit those adult care facilities really hard. But Josephine's, I mean, they've had 6 deaths. There was a new one reported today, which I know is 6 too many. But their efforts from the get-go were really swift and really kind of the lockdown seemed to work. Their facility has got all these different kind of wings, and they were able to kind of keep the nursing home people that were positive in one area, lock down everyone else. And then it was just a couple days ago, the people in the suites, there was no more cases that had worked its way through, and nobody tested positive. It was just confined to one area. Whereas you see all the other adult care facilities, there was in Bellingham and on Woodby and up in Skagit, and then down in the Seattle, and then down in Everett, where they had 1, 2, 10, 20, and then it was 50, and they've got they're dealing with a dozen or so deaths in a lot quicker span than Josephine. So,
right.
So I mean, the measures they took seem to have worked really well.
Yeah. No, that's really good to hear. And definitely for all of the medical staff that have just continued to, be part of that and work in these situations and have to deal with all this chaos that's going on.
Yeah, I know. And I'll echo the sentiment that a lot of people do is like, when this is all over, it's those, frontline responders that, are going to deserve a parade or more.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of fear and there's a lot of stress that's going on right now from so many different reasons around it. Because it's not just the COVID, but it's the economic, it's the everything about it.
It's the uncertainty.
Yeah. I think that's well said. Yeah. And, these people have to go in, most of us are trying to stay away from it and avoid it. And all of these people have to go into a place where they know it is and deal with that stress every day. So very thankful for those people.
Yes. Yeah. And I hats off to them. I mean, I've had my hats off to healthcare workers for years because I can't stand the sight of blood. So I lean on them. I'm glad that they can do it. It's something I can't do.
Yeah. Yeah. No, for definitely the people that have had to step up and the people that are really the people that are kind of unsung heroes throughout normal life with the medical teams, the teachers, and just seeing that, they've had to work through this very difficult time, but they've been worthy of the task and stepped up to it. Kudos to all of them for what they're doing. So,
yes. Yep.
And really I'm very, very thankful for the Stanwood Camano community. I have seen in other communities where there's these posts and stuff of people that are, slamming small businesses and stuff like that for even being open, even ones that are considered essential. And we have not experienced any of that. The customers that have ordered from us and come through, and despite having to pass through quickly and just do takeout, have been very thankful, super supportive during this time. And I just think this community is such a great community to be a part of.
Yeah, and I track it on kind of a wider scale across the whole area, and I have not seen too many people out there either complaining or businesses doing anything super, out of the ordinary. Everyone seems to be doing what they should be at the grocery store, doing what they should be at stores, maintaining social distance. I think it goes back to it kind of hit us first here.
Yeah.
And we kind of are a week or two kind of ahead mentally than a lot of the rest of the state or country.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So, yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. We're actually recording this at night, probably both at home, because this is the only time we could get time to do this, but really appreciate it.
Yeah.
I just wanted to give everyone kind of a quick update and more of a hyper-focused update of what's going on in our community with it. But also just, it's really neat to hear all the positive things that have come out of this and, to see how the community's responded in a positive way.
Yeah. And I'm sure there'll be a whole bunch more still to come.
Yep. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.
All right. Islanders, I will talk to you on the next one. Well, a big thank you to Evan Caldwell for joining us back on the podcast again. And thank you for listening. If you haven't already, be sure to rate, review, and subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast platform. It really helps us be found by other Islanders like yourself. And for more information on this episode, go to CamanoCommons.com/EP41. Again, that's CamanoCommons.com/EP41. EP41. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.